she goes back around again. One time and parks the car. Oh,
The views and opinions expressed by the individuals in the following program do not necessarily reflect those of its producers, Metaphor Creative Media, its management, or affiliates.
As police officers, we're witness to some of the most amazing things in life. Some comical, some horrendous, and some just plain miraculous. When asked why you went into law enforcement, most officers will tell you, because it's like having a front row seat to the greatest show on earth. Today, we saved you a front row seat. This is Cobservations.
From Broadcast Beat Studios in Oakland Park, Florida, Metaphor Creative Media presents a show that gives you a personal glimpse of what law enforcement officers see and do in their typical and not so typical day of work. From walking the beat to detective, Rob has 35 years of law enforcement experience. Although the staff are all active or former law enforcement, any views, opinions, and all other show content are in no way official views, statements, or policies of any law enforcement agency. To talk to our host, call the podcast studio toll-free at 888-511-COPS. That's 888-511-2677.
Hello again, and welcome to Conservations, your front row seat to the greatest show on earth. I'm your host, Rob Lerner. Tonight joining me is our co-host, Gary Dickinson. Gary, how are you?
Good, buddy.
How was your week?
Oh, it was hectic.
You think so?
Oh, my God.
Hurricane Dorian had everybody a little bit on edge.
It did me.
Yeah, it was a very stressful week.
And thank God I didn't have any horses to deal with this time.
Absolutely. We definitely dodged a bullet. We broadcast live every Thursday night at 7 p.m. from the Broadcast Beat Studios located in Oakland Park, Florida, on the Cobservations Facebook page and the Cobservations podcast channel on the Metaphor Creative Media YouTube page. If you have any questions, comments, or a story you'd like to share, you can join in on the conversation by giving the podcast studio a call at 888-511-COPS. That's 888-511-2677. You can also instant message your questions and comments live on our Facebook page. Here on Cobservations, we attempt to give you a personal glimpse of what law enforcement officers go through on a daily basis. We also talk about recent events, happenings, and the latest hot topics pertaining to law enforcement that not only affect officers, but you, the general public, as well. Last week, we discussed the dangers of traffic stops and pursuits with our guest, Dane Swade. Normally here on Cobservations, we have a guest appear and discuss various topics that range the gamut of police work. This week, however, has been anything but normal. This week found South Florida preparing for the mother of all hurricanes, Hurricane Dorian. Dorian was predicted to hit South Florida as a strong Category 4 and possibly Category 5 hurricane. Category 4 hurricanes have sustained winds between 130 and 157 miles per hour. A Category 5 can clock in at 157 miles an hour or higher. At one point, the sustained winds from Dorian actually reached 185 miles per hour when it made landfall in Elbow Cay in the Bahamas. For what seemed like an eternity, South Florida, in particular West Palm Beach, where I come from, looked like it was going to take a direct hit, and before it did, Dorian appeared to be gaining strength. Tonight we'll discuss the preparations that first responders take and the sacrifices they make when a catastrophic incident is approaching. But before we do, like always, I'd like to discuss some recent happenings in the news that pertain to law enforcement. In particular, there was a shooting in New York City where a masked gunman was killed in a shootout with NYPD police officers. The masked gunman was killed in a shootout with police who confronted him on a Brooklyn street and pursued him into a backyard early Monday. The shootout unleashed dozens of rounds in a yard in the Brownsville neighborhood. Police Chief Department Terrence Monahan said no officers were injured. The police department hasn't released the identity of the body. The encounter began when 3 uniformed officers on patrol in an unmarked car spotted a man wearing a mask. They made contact with him, and he immediately took off, and a foot pursuit ensued. As one officer got out of the car and the others drove around the corner, the man pulled a gun and fired on the car, leaving a bullet hole in the passenger side front door. They encountered him about a half hour later in the backyard, and I believe there were 60 rounds that were fired, Gary, from the handgun when the shootout ensued. It was a massive shootout that they encountered. 65 rounds were fired in all, I think.
But they don't know how many the bad guy fired?
No, he fired quite a few shots at them. You know, and the sad thing about that was after the shootout happened, the New York Post ran a story where one of the police officers was viewing a video of the encounter. And upon viewing it, he was overheard to say, well, at least that's one less a-hole that we have to worry about suing the police department. And I guess the complaint was made, and then they're actually looking into it, which I think is kind of bizarre.
Wasn't he a Blood's gang member, though?
Yeah, later on they found out he was a Blood.
Well, then he was an a-hole, wasn't he?
I would say so. I would definitely say so. But
And if that was me that said it and they asked me, I'd say, yeah, I said it.
yeah, there's nothing wrong with, you know. I
Wait,
didn't
gonna
find
hurt the
anything
guy's
wrong with that
feelings?
comment. No, he's dead. He's dead.
And he did everything he could do to kill our officers, too, so.
Absolutely. It's kind of crazy. Then there was a shooting in Texas, the mass shooting in Texas recently. And that was after a traffic stop. It was after a traffic stop, the subject was stopped, I believe, for a traffic infraction. And I think shots were fired at the police at that time. But prior to that, he had called the FBI and the police and was ranting to them on the telephone. And this gentleman had been fired from the company. Then he called 911, and I guess it was on Saturday afternoon. State troopers were pulling over the car for failing to signal. And at that point, he pointed a rifle towards the rear window and fired shots at the police.
Now, the cops had no reason. I mean, they had no knowledge. It was just a normal traffic stop.
Correct. It was a traffic stop for an infraction, and the shots. And it goes back to what we discussed last week with Dean. You know, you never know what you're doing. This was a traffic infraction, and the next thing you know, you have shots being fired at you.
Well, thank God he fired the shots before the cop got out of the car. At least he did that much. He was stupid enough to do that, because if he would have got out of the car, he would have got killed.
Exactly. You know, one of the troopers was struck, and then the gunman fled. And what he did is, as he was driving, he fired at random. And then he drove some 300 miles. And I guess at some point the police used a SUV to ram the vehicle. And this was by a movie theater, and then he fled. And I think he wounded 2 officers before he was killed in the shootout.
But when he was firing random, I think he killed or at least injured a bunch of other citizens, too.
Yes, he did.
He was shooting at people driving by.
Yes, he killed a few. And the last stop, he was going to the movie theater, where it could have been, you know, who knows how many people could have been killed at that point.
But you know, when you get calls like this, it's an ongoing event. It's not like you're going to one scene, one place. You got a guy in a building, or something like that, where you know you're going to be. This one you just have to take it as it unfolds, you know. And the cops have to use their common sense, and they have to let it play out and take them down when they get the chance, you know. This guy was in control of the pursuit somewhat, so depending on how many cars he hit, what he did. So the police officers did a heck of a job on this, if you ask me.
No, absolutely. And the problem was, like you said, it was on the move. It wasn't a static scene. It was constantly moving and changing. And, you know, it's the same thing. It's just another mass shooting that's in the news. It seems these are happening more and more, almost on a daily basis, it seems.
Well, a lot of it's due to mental illness, and obviously this guy wasn't wrapped too tight.
No, definitely not. It was another sad day. You know, we're talking about sad days. We just had another NYPD officer commit suicide recently. This was the 10th. It was a retired sergeant. He just retired. Just retired and committed suicide. Nobody knows why. He joined the police department in 1992, and he was assigned to Transit District 30. This is, like I said, this is the 10th suicide. And we've discussed that before with Dean, with Papa. And, you know, it just seems to be a crisis that's going on.
And I wonder, does it seem like it's just New York City for the most part?
It's not that, no, it's not. It's nationwide. Nationwide, you know, suicides are up. There have been more suicides and line-of-duty deaths so far this year. But it just seems there's an epidemic going on in New York City for some reason. Like I said, this is number 10. This is number 10. And, you know, there's help out there. You know, there's Papa, and their toll-free number is 888-267-7267, and the Suicide Prevention Hotline at 800-273-8255. So there's help out there. You know, the guys just have to reach out to it.
Well, cops, they want to take care of everything themselves and kind of a macho type of thing, and they don't want to call for help. But if you're ever going to call for help, this is the time.
Absolutely. Reach out, make a phone call. We have to be cognizant of our brothers and sisters.
Especially when, talking to other cops at least. Call your friend, call your buddy, call somebody you work with. Nobody understands like we do.
No.
And how many citizens have we talked out of doing this?
Yeah. I remember doing that one time. I was assigned to the switchboard in the precinct, and I was on the phone for about an hour. I had received a phone call. A woman called up asking for the suicide prevention hotline. She said, this is going to sound like a bad joke. When she called, it was busy, and she called me back. She said, it's like a bad joke. Here I'm looking for help, and I can't get through. And I spent probably about an hour and a half to 2 hours on the phone talking to her. And we talked about everything, and everything worked out fine. She called me back a short time later thanking me. Thanking me. She said, thank you. You really got me out of a spot. So you never know.
No.
You really don't. All right.
Well, you did a good job there, Rob.
I tried. Cobservation is broadcast live every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Cobservations Facebook page and the Cobservations channel on the Metaphor Creative Media YouTube page. If you have a question, comment, or a story you'd like to share, join the conversation by giving the podcast studio a call toll-free at 888-511-COPS. Don't forget, you can also instant message your questions and comments on our Facebook page. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll discuss the preparations that first responders take and the sacrifices they make when faced with a potentially catastrophic incident.
If you or someone you know would like to appear as a guest on the show, you can book your appearance on the Cobservations Facebook page, or you can email the show directly at cobservations@yahoo.com.
Hey, can you chop the pineapple? Chop the pineapple.
Nope, I'm high. How about I wash off the grapes?
Yes.
Okay.
You're already making good decisions when you're high.
I want tacos. Will you drive? I'm a little toasty.
Nope, I'm high. Let's order in.
Don't make an exception when it comes to driving. If you feel different, you drive different.
Hey, can you...
Awkward. Do I look familiar? I should. You might remember me from here. Here. Or maybe even here.
But an awkward silence can be a great thing.
It can actually be a perfect moment to reach out to a friend and ask if they're okay if they seem down.
It doesn't matter how you say it.
You all right?
Everything's okay?
All G?
You all right, girl? You cool?
You bugging dog.
Just show you're there for them.
Go on, Kelly. It's easy awkward.
Hey, you haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org. How to know if you should reach out to a friend. Your friend might.
To talk to our host, call the podcast studio toll-free at 888-511-COPS. That's 888-511-2677. Now back to Rob.
And welcome back to Cobservations. We're changing gears a little bit tonight in discussing the preparations and sacrifices that first responders make when faced with a potentially catastrophic event. When we say first responders, we mean all first responders: police, fire, paramedics, EMT services. Gary, another thing that was in the news this week was Hurricane Dorian. And to say it's been a nail-biter would be an understatement.
That's true.
it looked like we were going to take a direct hit, and you change from update to update. They didn't know really what was going on, but it looked at one point that West Palm Beach was going to get decimated. We saw what happened to the Bahamas, and it just sat there and sat there, and at one point it wasn't even moving. It just totally wiped out portions of the Bahamas. Some portions were spared somewhat, but a lot of it was just decimated.
Yeah, and I feel really, really bad for those people. I also believe the hurricane guys that put up the forecasts and the models, I really think that they're pretty sharp and they know where it's going. But in this case, because it was such a bad hurricane and it was just sitting right off of my house, I was really worried that if they got it wrong, what happened in the Bahamas would have been at my house.
Or if they got it right. What do you mean if they got it right?
For 180 mile an hour winds, it would have been devastating for all of us. And for me, well, I'm retired now, so but back in the day, we'd have to go to work, and so I would have to get my house all prepared, all my shutters up, make sure my wife's got all her supplies, and make sure I got all my uniforms and my go bag and my stuff and my supplies. Then I had to take care of 2 or 3 horses that I had. And I remember one time a lieutenant called me up. He said, "Listen, it's time to come to work." I said, "Look, I'm not done with my horses." I said, "What am I supposed to do? Tell my daughters your horse is going to die because I got to go to work?"
May I ask you, do you know what the word hurricane means?
No.
Okay, I'm going to educate you. Well, I happened to do a little research on it, and it says the word probably comes to us by way of the Spanish explorers. They picked up the term from the Taino Indian word hurricane, which meant evil spirit.
Oh, it was evil, all right.
Yeah, it could be very evil. And that word probably came to them from the Maya word hurricane, which meant god of storms or bad weather.
I can understand
and
that.
I guess hurricanes is an appropriate term for it. My first experience with a hurricane was back in 1989 New York. It was Hurricane Hugo. And up until that point in my entire life, the only times we heard about hurricanes were when they came down here in South Florida. And I remember they told us, get prepared and put masking tape in the shape of an X on your window. And that was it. And every window I had masking tape on it. And I remember I was working at the time, and I told my wife, I said, "Listen, because I was off, I said, whatever you do, don't answer the phone."
So they can't call me to work.
They can't call me and do not answer the phone. And I stayed home, and it was nothing. But I remember watching the news, and they were showing the beach and the surf, and you had people that were in the water, and the waves were crazy, and a lot of people took advantage of it to go surfing. Which they do here too.
Yeah, surfers are crazy people, so
they get out there. And then on the very west end of my precinct was a private beachfront community. I remember one of the news reporters was doing a story, and in the background you could see a beach house that was on stilts, and the sea was angry. You could see the waves. It was still really going. And in the middle of the story, as she was talking, all of a sudden the house came off the stilts and was gone. It went right into the water, and I was like, "Oh my." Oh my God, it was insane.
She didn't go with it, did she?
No, she didn't. But it was, and then that's the first time that, we really saw damage from a hurricane, what it could possibly do. And then the next biggest hurricane was back in 1992, Hurricane Andrew. And that hit Homestead and decimated it. Yeah. Did you have to respond there when?
They sent BSO, the Broward Sheriff's Office. They sent about, half the department down to Dade County, and I got to stay up here and supervise a team up here. But, I went down there afterwards, and boy, it was just devastation. And of course, they finally determined that Hurricane Andrew was a Category 5 and not a 4.
Right.
So, that's what we would have been looking at if Dorian would have made a left turn.
I had spoken to some of the guys that got mobilized for that, and I remember them telling me what they would do is they paired them up with officers from down there, from Miami-Dade, or people from Homestead that knew the area. And the guys that worked there, the devastation was unbelievable. Street signs were down. If you didn't know your way around there, you had no way of knowing where you were. And that lasted, God, I don't know how long guys were down there, that were sent down there mobilized. They were down there for quite a while. I think a couple of weeks that they were actually down there.
That's terrible.
I don't know how long it took them to actually recover from it.
I don't really remember, but that was a devastating time for everybody, because at first they thought Andrew was going to come to Broward, and I remember working through that storm, and of course it was nothing really for us, but we thought it was a big deal. But and then of course they sent out a book about Andrew. Even that's how serious that hurricane was.
Yeah, at that time, that was, I think, one of the strongest ones to hit South Florida, in recent times. We moved down to South Florida in 2001, and from 2001 to 2004, it was pretty much uneventful as far as hurricanes. I mean, there may have been some tropical storm watches, but I don't remember getting hit with any. But in 2004, we got hit with Hurricane Charlie. In 2004, we had 4 major hurricanes that year, but Charlie was the first one that I remember I experienced.
Yeah.
And I remember I had to come into work. I had to prepare my house. We had to prepare the house, put the shutters up, get everything in order for the house, and then I had to come into work. And I remember my daughter at the time was 11 years old, and she couldn't understand why, Daddy, why are you leaving us? Who's going to protect us?
Yeah.
And how do you explain to an 11-year-old? Because 11-year-old looks at you, and even the older kids say, you're the dad, you're the protector. Okay.
Yeah, of course.
And now you're leaving to go protect everybody else, and
you have to leave your family to go protect somebody else's.
Yeah, and it was hard. And I remember explaining to my daughter. I said, "Listen, honey, this is what police officers have to do, and firemen, and first responders. We have to go, but there would be people here just in case you need them to take care of you." But it was hard. She had a very difficult time understanding.
Yeah, I guess so at 11.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's what we do. We leave our families during times of crisis to protect other families, and we rely on other first responders to protect ours when we're not there.
Yeah, that's true.
In 2004, we had Charlie, Jean, Francis, and Ivan.
Yeah, that was a really stressful time for me, because, like I said earlier, I'd have to be away from my family. I had a wooden barn, so I had to take my horses other places that had concrete barns, and of course that would cost me a fortune just to put the horses there, and we had to go back and get them afterwards. And what are we going to do if we can't go get them because we're flooded, or this is out, or it just, you had to. You just didn't take them over there. You had to have all their feed and their hay, and you had to bring everything. So, and then of course we went to work, and 4 hurricanes in a row. That was really stressful on everybody, but especially I think the first responders, because after a while we just got worn out.
Yeah, absolutely. And Charlie was the strongest hurricane to hit South Florida since Andrew in 1992.
Yeah.
So it was something. So that was 2004, and then 2005, remember, we had Dennis and Wilma. And I remember when Wilma came in, it was originally, we were hearing, it's going to come in as a Category 1 or a Category 2. And I remember my wife telling me, listen, I don't want to put the shutters up. She hated being closed in, because the house is pitch black, and you really don't know what's going on outside. And we went back and forth, and I said, no, I'm putting up the shutters. I'm going to put them up. And she didn't want it, and my neighbor wasn't doing it. So she said, listen, Joe's not doing it, and I really don't want to, and it's only going to be a 1 or a 2, not that bad. And that's another argument I lost. So I said, okay. So we didn't put the shutters up.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And, I remember, I compare a hurricane to a football game. It's like 2 halves. You get the front of the hurricane, then the back. And when the hurricane first came, it wasn't too bad. Wasn't bad at all. And when we had that break in the storm, I remember we went outside and we surveyed the damage, and I didn't have any at that point. One of my neighbors across the street had a screen room that had a support bar that was hanging down, and that was pretty much it. And it was beautiful out. It was nice. It was sunny. It was really calm. And then we went.
But that was a Category 3.
Well, yeah. And then we went in, and then the storm started up. We got the back end of the storm. And I remember sitting in the living room watching my sliders start to bow into the house. You can actually see the frame starting to come in. And we ended up in a closet. my wife, my kids, and my dogs. We ended up in the closet. I remember looking at her and saying, "Oh yeah, I don't want to put the it's only going to be a category 1, category 2."
Let's don't put them up. What do you say? Huh?
I said, I am never going to listen to you ever again, ever. Hey,
I remember. You talk about being away. I was actually at the airport at the time when Wilma came through, I believe, and and my wife called me in the middle of the storm, and said, screaming and yelling, the French doors in the back are bowing out, and I had shutters on them, but the wind was pulling them out, and she was afraid it was going to break through and go, and my daughter and her were holding on to them as best they could, and I didn't know what to do, and I'm trying to think, and I'm thinking, well, call Mike. He's my best friend. He lived about a mile from me. I said, call Mike and ask him what to do. So she called him up. He said, get an electric cord, tie it around the handles, and then go in the kitchen and tie it around the post in the kitchen and tie it real tight. And that's what they did, and that's how they kept the doors from blowing out.
It's crazy.
But then there I wasn't there to protect them,
Hey, I want to say hello to Joe Brownlee, who's some comments here. He paid you a very nice compliment, by the way.
Joe.
You love Joe. Yeah, he said, you're a really old guy.
Gee, thanks, Joe.
And love to Skip Moats and John Corman. It's funny. People don't realize, as soon as there's a threat of a hurricane, people panic. They go into panic mode instead of preparing a little bit at a time. You know when hurricane season starts and when it ends. So the smart people prepare a little bit at a time. They stock up on supplies, water, batteries, whatever they're going to need or what they think they need. And then you have the people that don't prepare at all. And then it's a madhouse. It's a rush, and you go to the stores, and the shelves are empty, and you can't find anything. And I remember, I think it was during Wilma, one thing, everybody wanted, who's got beer? Yeah, that's what you wanted, beer and gas. Somebody go find where we can get beer and where we can get gas.
Yeah, just what I need to do when all the windows are blowing out, be drunk and not.
And then from 2005 to 2017, we had a 12-year break. It was nice. It was nice and quiet. 12-year break. And then we got hit with Hurricane Irma.
Oh boy!
Which was the strongest observed hurricane in the Atlantic in terms of maximum sustained winds since Wilma. It peaked at a Category 5, 180 miles per hour before it hit Florida as a Category 3. Yeah, it was a monster.
I got to tell you, I was retired by then, and the reports were that it was going to hit us dead on as a Category 5. So, because it was a Category 5, even I was scared. And I'm not scared of nothing usually.
Yeah,
my wife was scared. We were scared, And but tell you the truth, we packed up all our stuff, our kids' kids, 3 pets. I think 2 5-gallon cans of gas in case I ran out, and we fled. We fixed up the house and we took off, and we went to Tallahassee. Well, of course, then Irma came to Tallahassee,
and we thank you for that.
And I'm thinking, what the? Yeah. So I couldn't stay in my friend's house because he had big oak trees around it, so we had to go to Destin and get a hotel room on the beach. It made it a little bit nicer, but
Absolutely. Richie B says hello.
Hey, Richie.
Yeah, I remember with Irma, I had to prepare the house, and I was gone for 3 days. I was gone for 3 days, and as a lot of guys were, you're just away from your family, and you did what you had to do. You would go out when you could patrol and do damage assessment, and even we had safe shelter, but we also dealt with power outages.
Yeah, and then you run out of your own supplies.
Yeah.
I mean, people think the cops got an unlimited supply of everything, but that's not true.
But and people, it's rough being away from your family. You want to help everybody else, but your main concern always is your own family.
About them.
Your own family. It's hard to be away from them. And thank God, everybody survived. And then 2018, we got hit with Hurricane Michael, which was a strong Category 5. It hit us at 160 miles an hour, but it didn't hit South Florida. It hit the Panhandle and did a lot of destruction. And we watch these forecasts when these meteorologists telling you, it looks like the hurricane's headed this way, and if there's a little wobble, it could go this way, and you watch and you hope and you pray. with Dorian, when Dorian hit the Bahamas and we thought it was going to come headed towards us, we were all praying for that turn, a northern turn or a more easterly turn. And we knew it was scheduled to go after it hit us, it was going to hit the Carolinas. And I'm saying to myself, the people in the Carolinas, when the Bahamas got hit, we were happy that it wasn't us. It was like, and you felt bad for the Bahamas. And you figure the people in the Carolinas were probably looking as us being the next target, saying, "Oh my God, thank God we don't
Better
live
them than me."
Yeah, thank God we don't live in Florida."
Yeah, right.
It was like, thank God we weren't in the Bahamas. Thank God we don't live in Florida. And then we got spared, and now they're getting hit pretty bad in the Carolinas, and we're looking at it like, these poor people, and you don't know who's next. Who's the next victim?
Well, you kind of always do. You don't want anybody to get hit. But the people that got the worst deal on this, was the Bahamas. I mean, there's just, from what I understand, thousands and thousands of people missing. I think they're going to find a bunch dead.
Last count I heard, it was up to 20. It was up to 20, and you had a woman in the Bahamas. I don't know if you saw the story. She rescued almost 100 dogs and brought them into her house. And she had 79 of them that she kept in her bedroom. It's an amazing story. And people actually donated, I think, last I had heard, I don't know how much it is now, about $65,000 for her to take care of these animals. And I guess...
you can say anything you want on the radio or on TV, but if you say anything bad about an animal, you're dead meat.
Oh, absolutely.
So these people are going to be sending money. And
very sympathetic.
And animals are innocent. They can't.
No, they can't fend for themselves. And, unfortunately, there were so many animals that were found dead, that had drowned. Dorian came in. It was predicted to be the mother of all hurricanes and had sustained winds of 185 miles an hour Sunday afternoon and evening. And at one point, I think it had gusts hitting even 200 miles an hour. So I couldn't imagine having to deal with something like that.
Did you happen to hear on the news when the woman, I assume a cell phone, called and they broadcasted over the air that we're in an apartment building, please pray for us. She was crying, pray for my family, my babies. And it was so heart-wrenching to listen to this. And they were showing video out the window where she was at, I assume with a cell phone or something. But the things were underwater. It was bad. And she was in trouble, and I thought to myself, God, I wish I was like Superman. I could fly in there and drag her and her family out of there. But it turns out, I found out today, just before I came here, that what happened was because their roof came off, they went and all 8 people got in a car with an 8-month-old baby and an 85-year-old man with them. And they all survived, and they made it, and they're alive today.
Oh, thank God. Thank God. You saw some of the footage where the water was hitting the second floors of these houses. You could see it over the front door, and it was coming up to the second level. It was kind of scary.
Well, the problem is though that they're not going to have any potable drinking water there.
No,
I mean none.
No, there's going to be all kinds of disease. It's going to be a mess for a while. It's definitely going to be a mess for a while. This hurricane is on the charts as one of the most powerful tropical storms ever observed in the Atlantic Ocean. This is how powerful this thing was. So you can't mess with Mother Nature.
Well, people all along the Carolinas and even Florida, we're all pretty much used to going through these hurricanes. But, boy, when they get over a Cat 3 and become a Cat 4 and 5, it's really scary for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, for a while, it looked like we were definitely going to take a direct hit. And depending on what channel you listen to, we had the Weather Channel on for quite a while. And it was all doom and gloom. If you listen to them, we were going to get decimated, and that's why I like the local news channels, because I felt it was more informative. It was more real. Okay.
You kind of know you're going to die, but it's not going to be such a horrible death. So.
It's not. But this one meteorologist was great. He said, "Listen, this is what we have to tell you because this is what they're telling us." I guess from the Hurricane Center.
Yeah.
But he kind of laid it on the line, and you felt a little better listening to him.
Well, I remember the local guy saying, it's definitely going to make this turn. It's definitely going to make the turn. Don't worry about it. It's going to make this turn. And usually they don't do that. They don't say that when it's that close. Because the Hurricane Center got in trouble one time when they said it was going to hit like Naples or something, and it veered off just a couple of degrees and ended up hitting Fort Myers.
And that's the thing. It's just, you never know.
But I was glad when those guys said that. I mean, it made me feel better because definitely going to turn around is a big difference than, well, we're not sure.
Yeah, but you know, and it could have, very easily went the other way as well.
Yeah.
You know, all of a sudden something, the pressure comes down or the pressure comes up, and it just affects it so much more. You just don't know. It's a crapshoot. It's really a crapshoot. And now I think there were two or three brewing out there, but it doesn't look like we're going to be hit. I don't think it's going to affect us at all.
No, I heard a guy from the Weather Channel, I think it was today on the Hannity radio show, and he said that his prediction is we're not going to have any more until September 20th to August 10th, and we're going to get hammered again with a bunch of storms.
You know,
he didn't say they were going to hit Florida, but a bunch of storms are going to be coming. I don't know where he got that, but that's his prediction. And he's pretty good at it, so.
We'll find out. You know, I remember when we prepared our house for the storm, put up the panels, and I removed all the furniture from the backyard. And my garage is loaded to the gills with everything. And then you had some people that, well, I'm going to leave everything the way it is, you know. And then at the last minute, they didn't. And I always said, you know, I'd rather be the idiot that prepared for it and prepared my house than ended up that we didn't have to do it.
I always said, I hope I have to take this stuff down for nothing.
Right. Yeah, it's better than being the idiot that didn't prepare and lost everything.
Well, you know, one thing I do is every year when hurricane season starts, every couple of paychecks I go and take a couple of 5-gallon cans of gas. I go to the gas station, fill them up, bring them back, put them in my shed to run my generator. Because I remember we went through that before. We were 3 days without power. So by the time hurricane season even gets really going, I've already got 45 or 50 gallons of gas in my shed with a good generator. So then I'm kind of set as far as that goes. And the wife and I try to get some stuff. But I think it seems like this time, and tell me if you agree, it seems like all the stores, Publix and Winn-Dixie, they had it together more. Even though their shelves got emptied real fast, they stocked it back up right away. It seemed like they had planned that there was more stuff coming. And it was understood that the governor had something to do with that, DeSantis.
Yeah, everybody was pretty impressed with the way he handled this
I think
situation.
So too.
Yeah, Publix, you know, the Publix by my house was empty. My wife had gone, it was empty. She couldn't get bread and some other stuff. But I guess it depends on where you lived. You know, some places are better than others. Some places are more touristy. So that, you know, if you were in a tourist area, you probably had better luck in Publix than if you're in a residential area.
That's true.
So, all right. If you have a question, comment, or a story you'd like to share, join in on the conversation by giving the studio a call, toll free at 888-511-COPS. That's 888-511-2677. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll continue our conversation.
Put the keys down, Kevin.
But I'm gonna drive home.
There are several warning signs present that you shouldn't be driving.
My text to emoji ratio has gotten a little out of hand.
A little?
Yep, I'm definitely gonna call a ride home.
Put the keys down, Kevin.
But I'm gonna drive home.
There are several warning signs present that you shouldn't be driving.
My text to emoji ratio has gotten a little out of hand.
A little?
Yep, I'm definitely gonna call a ride home.
If you have a question, comment, or a story you'd like to share, join the conversation by giving the podcast studio a call toll-free at 888-511-COPS. You can also instant message your questions and comments live during the broadcast on our Facebook page.
Bye-bye.
Hi. Hoping for a crisp breeze to help keep you alert. Oh, he took a sip of water too. That'll probably help. You were probably gonna turn down the radio too, so you could focus, right?
probably okay isn't okay.
Right.
If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend.
I think the water line is what really drove it home. I blew on him. Hi, I'm a warning sign. I let people know when they're... Oh, gotta go.
I'll be right back.
Hi.
Bye-bye.
To talk to our host, call the podcast studio toll-free at 888-511-COPS. That's 888-511-2677.
Welcome back to Observations. We're discussing the preparations and sacrifices first responders make when we're getting prepared for a catastrophic event. You know, it's not easy leaving your loved ones behind in these situations, but it comes with the territory. It's what we do in times of crisis. Sometimes it means leaving our families to care for yours. It's not easy, but imagine if we didn't, Gary.
True.
You know, imagine if we didn't. If what would happen? The chaos. People would literally be left to fend for themselves.
Well, you know, if you remember back when we were working together at the airport, when those hurricanes came through, it was Ivan, or Charlie, Francis, whatever it was. We had a lieutenant there whose family was at home. He was at work with us, and he lost the roof on his house, if you recall that.
I don't.
Lieutenant O'Brien?
I remember Lieutenant O'Brien.
He lost the roof on his house in Buffalo.
That was a shame.
Certainly did. And they had to go to live in a hotel, and it was just a real nightmare for him. But, you know, he wasn't there to comfort his family, and they were there with this roof coming off. And can you imagine how scared him and the girls were?
No.
I mean, his wife and the girls, rather.
You know, it's funny. I remember the first hurricane that we went through. At one point, we were all huddled up in my bedroom, my wife, I, and my 3 kids. And you hear these sounds. You know, people say it sounds like a train coming through. And we had lost power. It was dark in the room. We were just laying there listening. And at one point, it sounded like my roof was coming off. It sounded like, and I envisioned my tiles being peeled off the roof. You know, thankfully, when it passed and we had gone outside, there was really no damage. The only damage I had, I think I lost a tree. So I was very lucky.
Oh, me too. And you know, through all those hurricanes, I have a screen patio. Not a screen pool, but just a patio, big, long one. I didn't lose one screen, believe it or not. I mean, I couldn't believe it, but no, I didn't lose one screen. And now I have a brand new roof on my house. So I was praying that would hold if Dorian came through, you know.
Absolutely.
But I don't think it would have.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we're going to talk about, you know, how times change. To go into another topic. You know, we talk about hurricanes and some of the history of hurricanes. I just want to touch on the history of policing, the evolution of policing. You know, and the evolution is a process of continuous change from a lower, simpler, or worse to a higher, more complex or better state. And that's what's happened in policing. You know, if you go all the way back when, I mean, I guess in the 1600s there was some type of law enforcement, but in the first professional policing was originated in 1829 by Sir Robert Peel in England, and those were the officers that were known as bobbies or peelers. They were called, and that was in London in 1829. And you know, if you look at how far we've come back then, there was no such thing as radios, and if you needed to summons help, you had to they used what was called a ratchet.
I got a message from Joe Brownlee.
Okay. There's a ratchet or whistle to summons assistance. You know, is that what they had when you first started policing? Did you use a ratchet or a tin can with strings?
Well, no, I was on horseback, so it was smoke signals at the time.
Yeah. You know, and even then things started to evolve. Back in the 1800s, then what they did was they instituted a red light system. And what they would do is they would put these red lights at these huge intersections. And when the light was lit, the officer on the beat would know that he would have to contact the station house to get his next assignment.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was just no communication. You know, if you were a block away, you would have to hope that the guy could hear your ratchet if you needed help. I remember when I was a rookie, one of the training officers said, "Yeah, when I started, we didn't have radios. If we needed help, we used to bang our nightsticks on the floor 3 times to summons help."
Well, it's funny. This is kind of true because I'm going to date myself here, but when I first started in the sheriff's office, we didn't have portable radios. Radios were in the car.
Right.
So when you went out at a domestic and you went in there, you were on your own.
Absolutely.
And if you were in trouble, whether the radio was a mile away or an inch away, if you couldn't reach it, you still couldn't get help. And then I remember the highway patrol, and I can't remember the circumstances, but the highway patrol had the same systems, and they didn't have portable radios either. And those guys really weren't paid well then, and they were all, people were afraid to say anything because administration would come down on you. But you know what happened? A state trooper ended up getting hurt, and he couldn't get to his car for help. I think he was beaten up or something by a bunch of guys. Right. But boy, the highway patrol wives got together after that, and they raised holy hell, and they got those troopers got portable radios after that, so they could call for help. And of course, when we got our first portable radio here at the sheriff's office, it was like a brick.
Right.
It was great for a fight because you could grab it if you didn't have anything else, and you had to survive.
Absolutely. Hey, when you're in battle with somebody, if my thinking is if you're fighting with a police officer, there are no rules for the police officer.
Yeah.
We don't fight.
There are for us, but not for them.
We don't fight fair. We don't have to fight fair. We have to fight to win, to survive, to go home.
Exactly.
That's our job. In 1870, the Chicago Police Department started to implement call boxes, like a call booth, not a box. The boxes were later on, but it was a booth, and it was set up with a type of telegraph system, and there was a clock inside that had 11 settings on it, from 1 to 11. And what you would do is each one was designated for a certain call. It could be for robbery or murder or thievery, whatever they called it back then.
Really?
And what the officer would do is he would go into the booth, adjust the dial to that particular spot, pull the handle. It would go back to the station where they would read the telegraph, and then they would know what was going on. If they had to send more people to that area, they would do it. And that was the communication. It was one-way communication at that point. Then in 1880...
that's really unbelievable.
But these are the advances.
It's pretty ingenious for the time.
When you think about it, absolutely. Then in 1880, they added telephones to the booths. So at that point now there was two-way communication, but it was strictly in the booth in 1880. And patrol back then was either a foot post or horseback.
Yeah.
It wasn't. There were no cars back then. There were no cars for patrol. Then the first police car was actually a wagon that ran on electricity. Okay, it ran on electricity that they were able to get from the street somehow, and that was in Akron, Ohio in 1899. It was able to reach a top speed of 16 miles per hour. Back then.
That's really moving, huh?
Yeah, and it ran for about 30 miles before you had to recharge it. So can you imagine being in a pursuit with somebody?
Have your battery run down?
Yeah, I guess there were no Evereadys back then.
I guess not.
Or Duracells. So, yeah, that was in 1899. And then as we advanced, motorcycles came into play. In 1908, the first police motorcycle was sold in Detroit, Michigan. And I give you 3 guesses what type of motorcycle it was, who the manufacturer was.
Let me guess. Started with an H, probably Harley Davidson.
Absolutely. Bing, bing, bing. And then 1911.
And I was still riding them in 1983. Harley Davidson.
No, they're still here. That's a staple.
They still are, yeah.
I know some departments have actually experimented with Hondas, but I think the staple is the Harley Davidson.
It is now.
1911 was the first actually motorcycle patrol that was started in Berkeley, California. So it's the first time where instead of having a motorcycle here, they actually had a motorcycle unit. So advances,
I guess.
And then with the advent of cars in 1928, the police department, Detroit Police Department, utilized the first on-air voice communication, where they could. It was a one-way radio where they could speak to the police officers, but they couldn't speak back. And it helped them with making arrests, but there was no other contact. If the officer had to get in contact, he had to go to a phone booth.
Yeah.
And call them. So it was just like...
But you know what? They didn't know any better.
No.
And they thought when that phone booth came out, boy, that's the big deal, huh?
Absolutely. You know, it's funny. You go back to the call boxes. I don't know if you have seen the call boxes, but
I've seen them before.
when I worked in Coney Island on the boardwalk, there were the old call boxes.
We're still there.
It was still there, and you know the story was that each call box usually had a pint of liquor in there.
Yeah.
To keep the guy warm in the
In
winter time.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, you know what they say: cops don't go hungry, they don't get wet
Or cold.
or cold.
That's it. Then in 1933, the first two-way radio was put into work with the Bayonne, New Jersey Police Department, and that was only in 9 of their police cars. So 9 police cars had two-way communication. The foot people didn't have any radios, so you know it was limited, but still it was a great advance.
Yeah,
When you think
of
about
course.
it, you know now with cell phones, everybody's got a cell phone. Or you know, with us it was beepers and cell phones. But the beat cops, you know, still had to use the call boxes, the telephones, and the booths. And also, when the officers, like you said, when the officers left their cars, that's where the communication stayed. So there's no way of getting help.
Well, you know, when we were narcs, and we didn't have cell phones yet. Once we got cell phones, we were like, how did we ever do any drug deals? Because all they ever do was we ran from phone booth to phone booth, putting in money, calling the drug dealer. Hey, meet me here, meet me there. No, I'm not going to meet you there. Okay, I'll call you back. And then you run to another phone booth and call them. And that was all night affair, you know.
When the hell they
with
did,
no cell phones.
When they did drug deals back then. Yeah. And you know, they realized there was definitely a need to get radios in the hands of all police officers, and it was back in 1960 they started. They fashioned a radio that was similar to the radio backpacks that they had in World War II. And that's what they equipped the officers with. Back then, they all weighed about 5 pounds, so it was like a brick. It was having a brick, hitting somebody with a brick if you had it. And, you know, now you look at the radio now, the advances, now they're getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
You having a good time over there on the phone? Who are you talking to?
Actually, nobody. I'm not that. I was thinking of something else. I remember a story with the big brick radios that we had, the big ones, and one of the guys for some reason was fighting a bad guy in between the double doors at Denny's. You know, they have the doors going in and
Right.
double doors, and he was on the ground fighting this guy, and he was losing. He pulled his radio off his back belt and was smacking him in the head with it. And I opened the door. I said, "You okay?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm about done."
Yeah. Take him away. Yeah, you know, there was an incident years ago back in New York with the old radios. There was somebody was actually killed by a police radio. There was somebody. It was a suspect. I don't remember what the crime was for, but he was fleeing on a bicycle, and the police officer, out of desperation, trying to get this guy, took his radio and threw
it at him.
Hit him in the back of the head, and the guy wound up dying.
Oh man!
Yeah, I don't know what the outcome with that, what the repercussions were with the police officer. I'm sure there was a major lawsuit. And
when was this?
This was probably back. I don't know if it was in the 80s, or in the 90s, back in New York City. Oof. Yeah, threw a Motorola radio, hit him in the back of the head.
I bet the cop didn't go to prison though.
I don't remember. You know, to be honest with you, I don't know what happened. You know, it's crazy. You know, so those are the advances with communication. And, you know, then you talk about firearms. You know, back then the police officers carried clubs. You know, most of them. In England, a lot of police officers still don't carry firearms. But they started carrying openly. It was part of their uniforms at the start of the 20th century, but prior to that, a lot of them used to carry them inside their jackets. But I guess at the start of the 20th century, you used to see them on the uniforms themselves. And the New York
NYPD had, I think they had them inside the pocket, or
well,
there was a pocket holster in there or something.
Well, it wasn't a pocket holster. You know, I had what was called a reefer coat, which was a very heavy winter coat, and that it had a hole in the
slit,
pocket,
right?
So you could access your gun.
There you go. That's
yeah,
right.
so you could get to your gun if your hand was in your pocket. You know, you talk about having a gun in your pocket. When I was in plain clothes, I used to keep a gun in my pocket, you know, just in case. And I'd keep, you know, if I was talking to somebody, a bad guy, a suspect, I'd have my hand in my pocket. He couldn't see my gun, but I was ready in case I needed it.
Yeah.
You know, it's always ready. You know, it's funny. The New York City Police Department was the first agency credited in having a standardization with their weapons. with the type of weapons that everybody had and rules and regulations as far as qualifications and all that. And that was the revolver. They were all carrying revolvers back then. It was 1885. Theodore Roosevelt was the police commissioner, believe it or not. And
Really?
He had ordered 4,500 Colt 32 caliber 6-round double action revolvers with 4-inch barrels, and that was the standard weapon at the time. He instructed officers marksman qualifications. He wanted everybody to be qualified and be trained in it, which we are today, and that still goes on with the qualifications and the marksmanship and all that. And then eventually semi-automatic pistols were introduced. And in 1967, they were adopted by the Illinois State Police. So the first time that a semi-automatic weapon was used in a very large department. But it would not be the last.
No. That's unbelievable. I think the revolver, I carried revolvers when I first came on, and I had a 6-inch Colt Python that was nickeled, and I loved that.
Was that a 357?
357.
Yeah.
But I carried, well, in the beginning we carried 357s, but then we went to 38 plus P. But I loved that gun, but then they made me change because they went to Beretta.
The 92F?
Yeah, and I had to get one of those, and I didn't want to give up that revolver, but once I did, it was okay. It was nice.
And then, from that, then they started looking for less lethal types of weapons. In 1960, they went to mace. In 1973, they went to pepper spray.
Yeah, don't you hate it when you spray a guy with mace and he laughs at you?
Well, yeah. But I'll tell you what's even worse. When I came to this agency, I had to do my comparative compliance class, and I remember one day the instructor telling us, okay, tomorrow you guys are going to get maced. And I was like, what do you mean we're going to get maced? He says, well, if you don't get maced, you can't get certified. Now, I misunderstood him. I thought that meant if I didn't get maced, I couldn't be certified to be a police officer. So I was like, okay. And I said, I don't get it. I carried mace my whole career, 17 years in New York. I had mace, and that was it. So he said, yeah, well, tomorrow you guys are getting mace. What I suggest is you go to the drugstore in the morning, get some Johnson & Johnson's No More Tears baby shampoo, because it helps deactivate it. After you get maced, you want to get it in your eyes and pretty much wash your eyeballs. So the next morning, and the only reason why I went along with this is because I thought I wouldn't be certified to be a police officer. I later found out I wouldn't have been certified to carry the mace or the pepper spray. If I knew that, I wouldn't have carried it. So when I went and I got mace, I remember sprayed it across my forehead, and I remember the instructor saying, "Oh, it didn't get you too bad," and then it started running down, and it's brutal. If nobody's ever been maced, you definitely don't want it to happen to you.
No.
I mean, I had snot running out of my nose, and I couldn't see. And then they want you to fight. They want you to know that you can fight through it in case you accidentally get maced by your partner or it comes back in your face. And we went through this whole thing, fighting, kicking, hitting with the nightstick, and then somebody grabbed you and they threw you into the shower. And there must have been about 8 of us. It was me, another guy from New York, and some other guys from different states. And I remember, as I'm washing the stuff in my face, I'm rubbing the shampoo and trying to lessen the effects. I hear one of the instructors say, "How come the only guys I don't hear crying?" Everybody was pissing and moaning. "How come the only guys I don't hear crying are the guys from New York?" And I'm listening to this, and because this guy from New York was trying to decide if he had to go to the hospital, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't cry if I wanted to. It was just like, and it was horrible. And after that, I had to go get my radio. So I went to get my radio, and there was a woman in the radio room, and she looked at me, and she said, "Oh my God."
What happened?
No, she knew. She said, "Oh my God, you got maced." And she took me by the hand and took me into the back office where there was a sink, and she was helping wash my eyes. And I remember driving home that day like this, because one eyeball was rolled up into the back of my head. I really, it was rolled up. And I remember driving like this. I was like, ugh. And I get home, and my daughter they looked at me like, "Oh my God." And then you go in the shower, and unfortunately, every time
it starts all over.
You reactivate it, and it was brutal. I remember telling my sons, I said, "Listen, I'm telling you right now, do not argue with the police. If they ever tell you to do something, you better listen." Well, I told them that anyhow. I said, "But you do not want to get maced."
No, no, not at all.
So that was the mace and all that. And it's funny, when I started...
I wouldn't carry mace. I never carried mace. But the bad thing was, whenever like your partner or somebody else was fighting with somebody and they pulled out the mace and sprayed the other guy, you always got it on you. And then you had to transport the guy in your car.
Look, I know in New York City there were quite a few toilet seats that were maced in the station house.
Yeah.
The guys thought it was funny. Said, "Yeah, we'll mace the toilet seat. You sit down to do your business." Yeah. Hey, it is what it is. And then we talk about when I started with the department. I remember the older cops before I was a police officer used to have the I don't know what you would call it, like the strips in the back, almost like a bandolero on the back of the gun belt with the bullets.
Yeah.
And they would reload from that. When I started, we had the drop-down pouches. So you would drop down the pouch, all 6 rounds would go into your gun, and then you would reload from that. And then there were strips. They also had...
You mean the pouch?
Yeah, the pouch.
Had the strip in there.
No, the pouch it was different.
Or loose bullets.
Loose bullets.
Way,
It was a pouch that you would line them up. They would be stacked, and you drop all 6 into your hand. You'd reload them. Then they also came out with these speed strips that the bullets would be in. Now, unfortunately, it always takes a tragedy for some departments to make advances. In 1986, there was a police officer, Scott Goodell, that was killed. He was involved in a shootout. As he was reloading his revolver, suspect came back and shot and killed him. This was in Queens. And from there, because of that, we went to speed loaders.
Yeah.
Okay, it took the death of a police officer to get us to go to speed loaders. And it's a shame. And the bad thing with the speed loaders, when the adrenaline's going, if you drop one, you drop them all. You're going to lose a couple of rounds.
Yeah.
That's the bad thing about it. And then it was in 1993 where we started going to the semi-automatics in New York. Specialized units had it, emergency service cops had it, undercover narcotics guys had it, but patrol first started coming out to patrol in 1993. I didn't go to mine until 95 because I was afraid of you hear stories about the jamming and the misfires and all that, and I was a revolver guy. They said, look, you can take a revolver, throw it against the wall, drop it in the mud, pick it up, it's still going to shoot. You didn't have to worry about it. It was, good old reliable.
That's true.
And then we went to 1999. Tasers came into play.
Yeah, those were fun.
And that's the funny thing with the tasers. I remember guys would, in order to carry it, you had to get tased. And somebody said to me,
I did too.
Did you? Oh, you got tased?
Yes.
You couldn't justify to me why I had to get tased. You said, well, we want you to know that you can. I still don't know what the reasoning was. I think it was more just for laughs, because
that's all we did was laughing at everybody.
Yeah.
I remember Richie B. Training. He was in my class.
Oh, so you were there?
And Richie, he's yelling, come on, tase me. And he's got those big muscles. Come on. Little did you know, with all these muscles, it worked even worse, Man, when they hit him, he dropped like a bag of potatoes.
Yeah, he told me the story, and
but he's yelling at him, come on.
Yeah, hopefully he's listening, because when he talks, he's doing the same thing. He's like, come on, and then went from come on to as he went down.
Yeah.
I was just like, you just could not justify. He was like, listen, I carry a nightstick.
I tell you, they work great though. They really.
But you don't
if you hit
carry,
the guy. But there's another gun, just like the guy with the mace that wipes it out of his eyes and laughs at you. There's guys that pulled those tasers out, and you had to fist fight them, and it was
absolutely
bad news of Black Rock trying to do that.
And then you get the guys where they shoot, and because they're too far away, you get too big of a spread, and you get the police officer who's standing next to the suspect gets tased also.
Yeah.
So there was a incident when, I'm not going to go into the agency or anything like that, but the tasers were first gotten, and they were chasing a stolen car, and the pursuit ended up where the suspect crashed into a tree, and all these police officers were there, just had all these tasers, and they were dragging this guy out of the car, and all of a sudden you hear everybody yelling, stop resisting, and he's screaming, I'm not resisting, and all of a sudden you hear they were dry stunning him, and I was like, I guess everybody wanted to check out a toy, and I was like, it was horrible.
I've drive stunned guys before, but I've also seen great big muscle-bound, really scary guys. One guy in particular on the video where they kept telling him, don't do it, and he kept pushing up, and they said, don't do it, don't fight us, and he went out, took his hands off the car, and pop, they hit him with that taser. He dropped out. He was crying like a baby.
I saw a video of the guy. This guy had to weigh about close to 300 pounds. He looked like a biker. I mean, he was huge. He was a huge man. And cops were much smaller. And same thing, they wound up tasing him. And he went down like, just went right down. And they cuffed him up. And he was sitting in the car and he said to me, let me tell you something. He says, I've been shot. I've been stabbed. I've been hit with baseball bats. He says, this is the most painful thing that I ever experienced. And he apologized.
And it's only, what, 5 seconds or 10 seconds?
Yeah, it's a 5-second ride.
Well, you know what? I had a kid tell me one time in the backseat of my patrol car. He said, bro, don't tase me. I'll take that ass whooping any day.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we moved into from the tasers in 1999, the advances. Then we eventually, 1999, they came, 2012, body cameras were introduced in California. And now just about all the agencies are carrying them now. And I remember when my first reaction to them was my worry is that it might cause a police officer to hesitate in doing what needed to be done. And I'm not talking about abuses or anything like that.
I understand.
You worry about that camera. But it's definitely been a lot more positive than negative. Okay.
They've gotten out to where they don't even realize it's on.
No, they don't. But what it does is it's cut down on false complaints. People make these complaints, and all of a sudden, and the complaints are entertained, and then you'll get an internal affairs unit that reviews the video.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, this didn't happen.
Well, there's been, people have said that, the cop said this, he said that to me, and it turns out it was just a bald-faced lie.
Oh, absolutely.
Just to try to get out of a ticket or something. It was just ridiculous.
No, and the same thing with these shootings.
And then what happens now? The cop can sue them.
We should be able to.
Well, we can. Nobody ever does, hardly.
Right. Same thing with these shootings. A lot of times, people, there's an outcry, the police shot, he was unarmed man, and all of a sudden you look at the video, and you see the gun, and you see the gun in the hand. So it's definitely a positive thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And a lot of times, too, when people know they're being recorded, they have a different demeanor altogether.
A lot of cops tell them you're being recorded right now. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm trying to think what's next, as far as technological advances. Where do we go from here?
Well, I regress a lot, but back before, when my radio was mounted in the car, I remember going to a domestic violence assault in Fort Lauderdale, and I go in the house. It's kind of comical. I go in the house. I get the husband on this side of me by the door. I get the wife on this side. They're screaming, yelling back and forth. All these little kids are there. And so I tell the little kids, get back in your bedroom. They run down the hall and go in the bedroom. And then the wife runs in the kitchen, and you can hear her going through the knife drawer. And you're like, oh my God, here she comes,
right,
with a butcher knife. And so she comes out of the kitchen. I still don't have a radio. I got my gun on her. I'm holding the husband back with my left hand, and I got the gun on her. And the little kids keep running down the hall, yelling, Mommy, Daddy, Mommy. I said, get back in the bedroom. They run back in the bedroom, and I'm like this. And I told the lady, don't make me shoot you. Come on, don't make me shoot you. I look out the window. Here goes a patrol car by. And he just kept going. But I couldn't get to the radio, and I called for help, It worked out. She finally got frustrated, threw the knife down and ran in the bedroom.
Thank God. I remember.
The husband left, and that was it. I didn't even arrest anybody. That was in the old days.
When I was a rookie, I was going through training, back in New York, one of the training officers, this guy, Louis Miller, God rest his soul, guy, it was amazing. I remember one day he picked up the radio. He said, I'm not going to imitate his voice. He said, this is a radio. It can save your life. Yeah, and he's right.
Yeah.
This is one of the most, the radio is one of the most important pieces of equipment that we carry.
Well, it took me a while to get used to having a portable radio, because I would still get in the middle of a fight and then go, oh my God, I got a radio right here. I can just call for help.
Right.
And I had to happen like 2 or 3 times before I finally, you have a radio. Call ahead of time.
Yeah, exactly. Have them respond. Now, it's funny, the radio, you'll hear guys go out.
Especially we didn't have very many deputies in those days, so you had to call ahead because it took them 30 minutes or 40 minutes to get there.
Depending on, they could have been on opposite side of the county. It's crazy. Well, all right. Tonight's discussion covered the preparations and sacrifices made by first responders when faced with potentially catastrophic events and the evolution of policing. Guys, if you have a topic you'd like us to discuss, we definitely welcome your ideas. And you can let us know on the Copservations Facebook page or email the show direct at copservations@yahoo.com. The Podcast Studio is the newest edition available here at Broadcast Beat Studios. So if you're interested in broadcasting your show, give Broadcast Beat Studios a call at 954-363-2908. Right now we're going to take another quick break, and when we return, we'll close out tonight's show. We'll be right back.
To talk to our host, call the Podcast Studio toll-free at 888-511-COPS. That's 888-511-2677. Now back to our host.
And welcome back to Copservations. Gary, thank you for being my co-host. I look forward to next week's show and your participation. Remember, you can join our podcast live every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Copservations Facebook page or the Copservations podcast channel on the Metaphor Creative Media YouTube page. If you or someone you know would like to appear as a guest, you can book the show and your appearance by clicking the Book Now button on the Copservations Facebook page, or you can email your request directly to the show at copservations@yahoo.com. As with the end of every episode where we honor the lives of our fallen brothers and sisters, tonight we honor Officer Kenyon Mark Youngstrom of the California Highway Patrol, whose end of watch was on this day, September 5th, back in 2012. Officer Youngstrom had stopped on the shoulder of the I-680 freeway to check on deer carcass when another officer on the same freeway radioed to him that he was pulling over a vehicle for an obstructed license plate. As the vehicle approached his position, Youngstrom signaled for the driver to pull in behind his parked patrol car. Officer Youngstrom approached the vehicle and began speaking with the driver as the other officer pulled up and parked behind them. The man suddenly pulled a handgun and shot through the window, striking Officer Youngstrom in the head and knocking him to the travel lane of the highway. The other officer immediately returned fire, killing the suspect. Officer Youngstrom was rushed to the hospital where he remained on life support until succumbing to his wounds on the following day. He was a U.S. Army veteran and had served with the California Highway Patrol for 7 years. He was survived by his wife, 4 children, his mother, and 5 siblings. As always, I want to thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Until then, stay safe and God bless.